I'd like to introduce Deborah P Kolodji to you. Well, actually, many of you will already know her. If you listen regularly to the podcast, you will have heard me read many of her pieces of haiku. But in case you don't, Deborah is the California Regional Coordinator for the Haiku Society of America, and she's on the board of Haiku North America. Debbie has published over 1,000 haiku, and her first full-length book, Highway of Sleeping Towns, won a Touchstone Distinguished Book Award from the Haiku Foundation. Congratulations, Debbie. I can only dream of doing that. I saw Debbie's presentation, Exaggerated Perspective in Haiku, at the Haiku Society of America's Zoom event earlier this year, and it made quite an impression on me. So much so that I chose perspective as one of our writing topics for 2021. I asked Debbie if she'd come along and do a presentation for us today, and I hope it's going to have the same inspirational effect on you as it had on me. Debbie, thank you so much for making the time to come and talk to us today. I'm very grateful to you. And now I'm just going to hand over to you and let you explain all about perspective in haiku. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia, for asking me to do this. I feel quite honored. I'm going to share my screen and put it in slideshow mode and get started. How come it's not? Trying to get my slideshow started. Sorry. Okay, here.
Oh.
There we go. Okay, exaggerated perspective in haiku. Inspiration for your Poetry P submission. I first became interested in exaggerated perspective when I read an essay by Hiroaki Sato, where he compared Issa to Hokusai, noticing the similarity in their use of exaggerated perspectives. As Sato notes, is there anyone who knows the name Hokusai and doesn't think of the painting of a great wave toppling over Mount Fuji? And this is from his book in haiku. And here is, of course, the great wave that we all know, with the giant wave, and you look at Mount Fuji, so small. And Issa, who lived at the same time, although their lifespans intersected, although it is unclear whether they ever met. There's no record of that. But he also uses exaggerated perspective in a lot of his haiku. Little snail, inch by inch, climb Mount Fuji. And here, Mount Fuji seems so much bigger from the perspective of a snail than if we're talking about two mountain climbers climbing Mount Fuji, which I feel adds to the magnificence of the mountain. A single mosquito stirs up a wind near my ear. And here you don't just have the buzzing of the mosquito, you have a full-blown wind at your ear. And again, here the exaggeration brings you to the sense of the actual moment that happened. Through a hole in the mosquito swarm, Kyoto. And this is very reminiscent of some of Hokusai's wood prints, like his Mount Fuji series, where you have Mount Fuji, kites flying over Mount Fuji, and you have the great wave going over Mount Fuji. Here you have the little hole in a mosquito swarm, and then you see the big city of Kyoto. And I want to move to examples of contemporary English language haiku that use the same principle. Autumn mist, we taste our way through the orchard. And I really love this because it's so evocative in so many ways. And we're not just eating one apple, we're eating the whole orchard. And I feel that, between that and the autumn mist, it just has a wonderful feeling. You know, if you said autumn mist, we taste the first apple. I mean, that's kind of nice, but it doesn't have the same mystery and layers that this little bit of an exaggeration adds to it. Darkened village, the bat's calls bouncing off the Milky Way. And the bat calls aren't actually bouncing off the Milky Way, but you get the sense of echoing and vastness by adding that little exaggeration. Slow hands, gently pruning a shape into sunset. This haiku, I mean, you're obviously not going to prune this sunset, but you get the sense of a hedge, and as you prune the hedge, you start to see the shape of the sunset behind it. And I just find that twist in the haiku really evocative. Sea anemones, I touch my finger to the setting sun. And I don't know how many people have been down to tide pools and touched the sea anemone, but there's just something really beautiful about this. You know, that you're actually not touching the anemone, you're touching the sun. And the sea anemone kind of looks like, you could imagine, like a child's drawing of the sun. So it's really just wonderful. And here's one of mine, Gray Morning, the whole world of foghorn. Skyscrapers, the ant that is me beneath them. And this sort of evokes the same thing as the snail in Mount Fuji, where you have the skyscraper that seems so much larger when you start thinking of it as an ant, and the ant that is me. It's sort of almost like it's a simile in a sense, but it's still an exaggeration. Beach dinner, the pod in her hand dwarfs the moon. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that properly, but a pod is a disc-shaped food from India that's made of flour. But, you know, just again, this is reminiscent of all of the Hokusai prints where you have the moon that seems so small when you think of the piece of bread or the pod in your hand. Deep space, what we keep from our children, what they keep from us. Space images work really well with exaggerated perspective because deep space is so vast and so huge. And when you think about those secrets that we never tell our kids or they don't tell us, and that widening gap between us, I feel that this has a really wonderful effect, this haiku. One by one, he hands over the spring winds, the balloon seller. I just love this one because you can see the balloon seller handing out balloons, but yet he's not handing just a balloon, he's handing you the spring wind. And again, this is just a beautiful way of looking at it. Globe street lamps, only one of them is the moon. Prior to making this presentation, I once did a workshop for the Southern California Haiku Study Group on exaggerated perspective, where we wrote them in the workshop. And Cathabella wrote this one, and then it was published at Kyoto Quarterly, and I just love it. I could see the street in Pasadena where Cathabella lives, and I could see these globe street lamps, and then I see the moon, and they all look the same. Heartland, the world winnowed down to wheat. There's something about, like my foghorn poem, where the whole world is suddenly wheat or fog or a foghorn. It's a very effective exaggeration if it's not used too much, I think. Wishing well, I scoop out moon. 14,000 feet, the mountain disappears into my breathing. Yakusuke Ishihara gave a presentation in Chicago in 1995 where he said, a haiku should present the truth as if it were fiction. He calls this introspective shaping. And where he's shaping the scenery of the human mind to fit the poetic truth. So the idea is that poetic truth can be shown through hyperbole, or as in my presentation, exaggerated perspective, to get the deeper truth to what you're trying to see or feel and experience in the moment. And here are two haiku by Ishihara. Pulling light from the other world, the Milky Way. Faintly white, it sticks to my face, the autumn wind. The wind isn't going to actually stick to your face, but who hasn't walked with the wind blowing at them and felt the pressure of the wind on their face? And it does sort of feel like sticking to your face, but you would have never thought of it that way. So again, this sort of exaggeration sort of conveys the truth in a way that the actual truth wouldn't. Like you just said, faintly white. The wind, as I walk into it, it just wouldn't have the same effect. And I'm going to end with this one. You know, again, an exaggeration, and you're telling the truth as if it were fiction. If only a dog could run free on the moon. And if you think about this, you know, you think of city dogs that have to stay inside or stay in a yard that's fenced. And, you know, they see a squirrel go over the fence or a cat they want to chase, so they want to run free. And obviously a dog can't run on the moon because there's no oxygen, but yet the sense of the emptiness of the moon and the vastness and no fences. And, you know, I think this gives the feeling of the truth of this. If it had been, if only a dog could run free in the neighborhood, it wouldn't say anything. But by saying run free on the moon, that exaggeration brings the truth home. So I like to say it's your turn to try to write a haiku using an exaggerated perspective. Some ideas to get you started. You can think of something really, really big, or you can think of something really, really small. And does this big or small thing remind you of something else? What feeling does it evoke in you? Or maybe you have a haiku that just isn't working, that it might work better and give a better truth if you added an exaggeration or hyperbole to it. And finally, quoting Ishihara, tell the truth as if it were fiction. And I'd like to end by showing some more of Hokusai's prints to perhaps inspire you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Debbie. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.